Hello and welcome to episode 50 of Off the Bandstand, live here at Monk's Jazz on the beautiful east side of Austin, Texas. My name is Christian Wiggs. I am your host. Tonight's performance and guest is John Mills, featuring his band John Mills Times 10, an ensemble that features exclusively compositions and arrangements from John Mills. If you don't know John, he is a brilliant saxophonist and international award-winning composer and arranger. John serves as the professor of jazz studies at the University of Texas at Austin. He has presented master classes at institutions and, if you have a pen ready, write them all down: Denmark, Russia, Germany, Chile, Guatemala, Slovenia, and Italy. And in 2019, he was inducted into the Austin Jazz Society Hall of Fame and has served as the musical director for the 2020 Grammy-nominated Best Contemporary Blues Album, Live at the Paramount, by the Ruthie Foster Big Band. If you can say all of that in one breath, I owe you a beer. So we are going to move on to the release of the week, which is John Mills' most recent recording with John Mills Times 10, which is called Flying Blind, released in 2017. And we are going to get into a whole lot of history of John's 50 years in Austin, Texas, and in the scene and everywhere else that he has been flown out to. But for now, let's dive into tonight's performance and episode. This is Off the Bandstand. ladies and gentlemen, welcome into now, well, this isn't my apartment anymore. Off the Bandstand was born out of this idea of wanting to keep the jazz scene cohesive in tandem with Colin Shook, which is why we've always been, this guy. Can we have a hand for Colin Shook over here? Owner, curator, all things jazz here in Austin. But it was meant as a way of connecting all of us, even though we had to be apart. You know, I'm not going to talk about the pandemic because we're all here now, and we are glad to be on the other side of this thing. But it was just this beautiful, opportunity once a week to sit down with some of the best jazz musicians, not only here in the Austin area, but it quickly exploded through a lot of the people here in town, like having Carmen Bradford, one of the last vocalists with the Count Basie Orchestra, in the very first few episodes, largely in part to do with her ties here in the Austin scene. So I'm going to stop talking about the prelude to this evening and welcome my guest, John Mills. Thank you so much for doing this, and congratulations on 50 years in Austin.
Yeah, I guess that's good news.
It is good news.
50 years, that sounds scary to me, but I'm afraid it's true.
Well, it's really just, it all worked out. All the stars aligned to have the 50th episode and you as
your
the
50th show. That's fantastic.
Yeah, this is very, very fun. So, it might seem like, and also I should say, congratulations on not only bringing the band back for one night, but the kind of famed Triple Crown tour of Elephant Room last night, Monks tonight, and Parker tomorrow evening.
Yeah, we're accustomed to, even in the best of times, playing once a month. So 3 nights in a row, we don't know how to act, so
sure,
we're out of control.
Well, I'm sure we'll have Michael Mordecai keep us in check if we start going off the rails.
Yeah.
Well, this might seem like an obvious question, but everyone loves a good origin story. So where did you come up, and how did that end up bringing you over here to the Austin scene?
Well, I grew up in Houston, where there was a lot of jazz. I mean, some jazz stars living in Houston. There's a great jazz club in Houston, but a very strong jazz education system in a particular school I was at in Houston. And I came to Austin because I knew I'd heard the University of Texas Jazz Band visit my high school on a recruiting trip. In fact, Mike Mordecai was in that band, although I didn't know Mike yet. But that proved to me, there's a place I could go where I know I'll be able to keep playing jazz. And so that's what brought me to Austin. Like so many people, the University of Texas had something to do with it, for getting here, and then the music scene was a reason for staying forever.
Sure, yeah. So, without being too incriminating, when you first arrived on the scene, was there some sort of immediate allure, or was it kind of like, all right, things are happening, maybe we got our work cut out for us, or was it just off to the races immediately?
Well, everybody was playing from day one, and I don't think anybody was really thinking about careers in music. I certainly wasn't. But from the very first day, there were jam sessions going on of all kinds, not strictly jazz, singer-songwriter kind of jam sessions. A lot of us got our starts. I was probably here for 2 weeks as a freshman, and I started playing gigs with the Nash Hernandez Orchestra, which many of my predecessors, again, Mike included, seeing him nodded, like our first professional gigs in Austin, where we were reading a combination of big band gigs and then cumbias and things like that. So that was like where a lot of us started. And there was, Austin always had a kind of an identity with a lot of really creative bands that didn't really fit in the mold exactly. And there's just a lot going on. And like I say, it was as far away from the music industry at that time as you could imagine, but there was a lot of energy. So, key people around, some of whom are still around the Austin area, who really energized it. Yeah.
I got a quick question for you. How different was 6th Street back in the late 70s?
Well, there was essentially one business that was open on 6th Street after 5 p.m. There was like a club, like the first location of Antone's, and then a little later Steamboat. But 6th Street did not exist as we think of 6th Street now. In fact, it was not until the 80s. I remember playing down there one night when we were closing up, getting paid or whatever, leaving the club at like 2 a.m. And the guy says, "Step outside, you're not going to believe this." And we looked outside, and there were swarms of people everywhere after 2 a.m. And so it happened essentially overnight.
Yeah.
I guess that was early 80s, maybe, that happened.
Signs and wonders.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you. Is that, I had read that you have recorded on over 200 albums. 200 albums. That's amazing. And appeared on 9 episodes of Austin City Limits PBS specials. Were there any of those Austin City Limits specials that really stand out to you as some notable ones?
Well, one very opportunity I got that I was by no means ready for musically, but I got the invitation to perform on a PBS, on an Austin City Limits special, Ray Benson and Friends Swinging Over the Rainbow with Willie Nelson. So that was probably the first ACL show I got on by, I don't know how, but I got on there.
How old were you whenever that happened?
Oh, maybe 23, something like that.
All right. Well, for those of us who are above 23 and those of us approaching 23, take notes. We have some work to do to get to that same kind of stature. And then another thing is that I also understand that you've written a lot of jingles, a lot of different things for different commercials like Chevrolet and also Specs Liquor.
Yeah, that's part of the beauty of writing jingles is you get paid and nobody knows you wrote it. So that's a win-win situation right there.
Well, I was going to say with Specs, instead of an invoice, you could almost just send them a grocery list and call it good, after you submit it.
Anyway, yeah. So if I just as soon get the dollars than the wares. That's just me. But anyway, writing jingles is great. You get to work with a bunch of great players who are essentially the same people I'd call for my favorite jazz gig. Because the same kind of challenges guys who hear something presented to them and 60 seconds later they're laying down the version that's going to be on the radio forever.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I went down the rabbit hole of checking out all of those different Specs commercials last night at about 3 a.m. because I definitely, once I found out that piece of information, I had to find them. And one thing that I will say is, just a testament to John's writing is that there were 4 comments. There was the most amount of comments on one of them from 2017, and it was a YouTube comment that said, "My 1-year-old loves this song. She bounces to it." So not only is he teaching at the collegiate level, it's also at the infant level as well.
I think the secret sauce on that is we had a double set of hand claps.
Okay.
Kirk, were you involved in that double set of hand claps we did on the Specs jingle? I don't remember. Yeah, that is the magic ingredient that we came up with at the last second.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that Specs is doing their part to make Austin a little bit more hip. What do you have next for us, John?
Well, we're going to do, we've got so many great players in this band. Part of the reason I can lure them to these things is I get everybody a chance to stretch out. So we're going to do a couple songs where you'll hear, not from everybody yet, but some of our other great soloists. This first one coming up is one that I think that caught your ear. It's called Half Past Sunday. It's going to feature Jake Lampa on the alto sax, as well as Russ Scanlon, who has rejoined us all the way from Santa Fe, his new home. Yeah. Russ, let's hear it for Russ. Let's hear it for Santa Fe. So anyway, that's what we're going to do next. Half Past Sunday, and then whatever comes after that, I think a deep, dark, mysterious, complex number called Sombras y Luz, where you'll hear from a couple other of our great players.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, John Mills. Yeah.
Okay, now for something scary. Here's your two. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2.
There is not a single soul that can watch this live stream and deny what we have here in Austin, Texas. That is just unbelievable. Man, you know, I want to make sure to take a moment here and thank Tito's Vodka for this evening. They're not a sponsor. We're just trying to get them to be, trying to build some social clout. At this rate, we might as well say Circuit City, you know. It's all the same. Well, John, you know, you've no doubt been able to collaborate with just some absolutely luminary musicians over the course of your career, and it's at this point where I have to reference the cue cards because the list is long. It's really a sampler plate for everybody, no matter what your flavor is. We have jazz musicians such as Steve Swallow, Carla Bley, Maria Schneider, our very own Butch Miles, who is in the house tonight.
Hey, Butch.
To name just a few jazz greats. I don't know if maybe I should preemptively apologize. I didn't tell him I was going to name drop him and say that he was in the audience. But then you also have R&B artists such as Bonnie Raitt and Aretha Franklin, alternative pop artists like David Byrne of Talking Heads. If you don't know either of those names, if you know the tune Psycho Killer, Qu'est-ce que c'est, ba 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 ba, that's David Byrne and Talking Heads. And then Jonny Greenwood of Radiohead, and then the list goes on. Ray Benson and Asleep at the Wheel, Lyle Lovett, Willie Nelson, as you mentioned earlier. You know, I'm sure all of these have been incredibly notable, but are there some that I missed? Maybe like one that has to do in Zilker Park that might have been an opening that was incredibly exciting?
Well, yeah, you happen to mention Zilker Park. I was racing through my index cards to see what I could think of. But yes, I had the opportunity. One of the groups I play with is a horn section called the Texas Horns, and we had recently played on a big record of Los Lonely Boys. And Los Lonely Boys were doing a series of concerts, you know, premiering that material that we played on. And that kind of wound up with the Los Lonely Boys, with us as the horn section in tow, opening for the Rolling Stones at Zilker Park for 50,000 people. Some of you were probably there just by the percentages and the probabilities. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. You know, it goes right along with playing for those big crowds and the famous people. So much of what makes Austin tick is any given night of the week with a bunch of fantastic players, just magical things happen. You know, not always, the cameras aren't always rolling like they are now, but that's where a lot of the great stuff happens, and always has happened in Austin. These guys up on stage are a big part of all that kind of thing that happens just every night of the week. So, you know, there are those kinds of flashy moments, I guess, that you put in your scrapbook, but there's a lot of just great music night after night.
Well, you know, that's something that, you know, the great Adrian Ruiz over here said something to me. I heard he kind of was like, oh no, what's he going to say? No, but he says, you know, that here in Austin we have an embarrassment of riches, and I can't think of a more fitting kind of tagline to associate with the Austin, not only the Austin jazz scene, but the Austin scene in general of music. Selfishly, I have to ask, what was the situation with David Byrne?
Well, a really great friend of mine, a wonderful composer, a wonderful musician named Stephen Barber, had been living in New York for a number of years, and you know, just all kinds of great accomplishments. And among other things, he was doing some work with David Byrne, and he lured David to do an album here in Austin, recorded in Austin. It was one called Grown Backwards, and I did some performing on it, of arrangements that Steve wrote, various woodwinds and things, and then I kind of, Steve was generous enough to turn over the the steering wheel to me for kind of a funk, Barry sax-oriented chart that I arranged for David Byrne, and a couple other projects through the graciousness of Stephen Barber, doing some orchestral arrangements for him, and you know, I did some other kind of performances.
Beautiful. How was he without incriminating you? Because if he was not a nice guy, you couldn't say it on camera, and it's certainly not on the live stream. But
well, he's a very introspective kind of guy from what I saw. Of course, usually, you know, the nature of that sort of encounter is you're not there to be a fan. You're there to do your job, you know, sure, and take care of the music. Sure. And that's what we were all doing. That's what he was doing. He was listening carefully and occasionally making suggestions or comments, and like a lot of those opportunities, those guys and women who are great musicians, that's sort of the subject of it. They're not being the life of the party. They're taking care of their project and thinking about making all those millions of decisions you're making during the recording process.
Absolutely. And belated congratulations are in order for your winning of the Sonic Award from the International Society of Jazz Arrangers and Composers for your piece. A symposium, for those of you who are unfamiliar, featured this specific year composers Chris Potter, Bill Frisell, Christine Jensen, and Vince Mendoza, just to name a few.
They were the stars who brought everybody to the conference. I don't think, I would never pretend I was in competition with those guys. They were the guests at that particular year, and anytime it's a competition like that, you just put your music out there, and sometimes you get lucky, and that was one of those times.
Yeah, well, as I understand it too, this was this specific symposium at the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley was one of those situations, kind of tragically, where two opportunities presented themselves and push had to come to shove. So can you enlighten us on that situation?
It's pretty much an amplification of what happens for musicians constantly, right? You've got no gigs for a week, and then suddenly two people will call you for Tuesday night. It's like, how did that happen? It never quite spaces itself out right. So I had won this honor, and I was going and made all kinds of plans to go there and attend and direct the band and all that. And then at the last minute, again, the Texas Horns got the opportunity, playing with Jimmy Vaughn, who we often play with, to open for Eric Clapton for 3 nights in London at the Royal Albert Hall. And for about 30 minutes, I was thinking, which one am I going to do? And then I thought, well, you're insane. You've got to go play the gig at Royal Albert Hall, which is what I did. And, it's a beautiful experience. And, I can't be everywhere. We all try to be everywhere, 2 or 3 places at once. But I actually looked into the possibility of flying back that night from London, and can I get to Denver and drive to Greeley? I mean, I looked into it seriously, and it was,
sure.
I couldn't come within, 6 hours, even with the best case connections, no delay scenario. It just wasn't going to happen.
So it was a toss-up between compositional royalty and playing for potentially actual royalty at Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah, and I kind of, given the choice between being sort of honored and just going and playing some music, I like the part where you just go play some music.
He's a humble guy, and no one can fault him for flying across the pond to go and play at a huge, the organ in that room alone, I'm not sure if it was utilized, but hey, at least to just look at it had to have been very nice.
It was spectacular, and we kind of got to sneak around the corner. We probably shouldn't have, but to listen to Eric Clapton, and it brought tears to my eyes. Sure. It was so fantastic.
Amazing. Well, let's hear some more of the stuff that you win awards to go and play. So what do you have next?
We've got one that was inspired by our trip to one of those conferences we played in New Orleans, and it was a very dark and stormy trip, very foggy in January going to New Orleans. And many of us were pretty sure that we saw the Swamp Thing somewhere on the other side of Beaumont somewhere. And then later that evening, we were in a very fine dining establishment in the Quarter, and we saw the Swamp Thing for sure crawling up the wall from the kitchen into the restaurant. And we don't have photographic evidence, but we do have this song that I offer as proof.
Just to be sure, Specs was not sponsoring this trip, right?
No, there was no no sponsorship. Every man for himself.
Sure. Absolutely.
So this is called Swamp Thing. You'll hear from Dr. Adrian Ruiz on trumpet, I do believe. Joey Colarusso once again on the Barry sax, and you'll get some kind of unpredictable chemistry between Chris Afterbaugh on the bass and our wonderful guest drummer Kirk Covington, the one and only Kirk Covington on drums. So this is Swamp Thing.
John Mills.
Yeah, Swamp Thing. And I should introduce all these great players just down the line one more time. Joey Colarusso on the baritone saxophone.
Jake Lampa on alto saxophone. Fabulous lead trumpet player Eric Johnson. On the jazz trumpet chair right behind me, that's Adrian Ruiz. And a very important member of this band, our trombonist Michael Mordecai, who also does so many of the logistics, makes it all possible. Michael Mordecai on trombone. Mike is somebody that I've been playing with steadily since the 70s. Somebody else in that category on piano, Hank Himsoth, from way, way, way back. The same goes for our guitarist, Russ Scanlon, who I've been playing with about that same length of time. Russ Scanlon. On bass, Chris Afflerbaugh. And the one and only Kirk Covington on drums, a.k.a. Captain Kirk. So we're going to sneak, how we doing there, Christian? One more song. We're going to do the title cut from this most recent CD. This is called Flying Blind.
And one quick thing to mention, because we have not done it yet, ladies and gentlemen, if you are joining us on the live stream, in this corner right there, all right, it's backwards, we have a Venmo and a PayPal. If you would like to donate to the band, any and all contributions to that are appreciated. Of course, the people who are here live, their patronage is just here in the studio. Of course, you are also allowed to make a charitable donation to the band. So they can get some Whataburger on the way home. You know, it's like the perfect way to cap a jazz gig. But if you are viewing online, please go over to this link right up here, the Venmo and PayPal. And again, here is Flying Blind.
Well, change of plans. Of course, I'd be the one to screw up the order of my charts. We're going to do one from our first CD called Force of Nature, okay?
Force of Nature, there it is.
2 bars of 3. 1, 2, 3.
John Mills times 10. John Mills on the tenor saxophone. Russ Scanlon on the guitar, featured on that last tune. You know, it just occurred to me, I do owe somebody a special credit, and it's the person who's been right next to me all along, Hank Himsoth, for teaching me an intro to music technology course 7 years ago, without which I don't think I would have been able to do this show. So really, he's the unsung hero of Off the Bandstand. We're going to put his face on the logo. Yeah. This new logo be damned. We're going to do a brand new edit. John, what a pleasure it is to be here.
Not bad for a band that last night played the first time in 15 months. Just last night. So I think the key is knowing the right people to call, and then everything takes care of itself.
Absolutely. Well, there's something that I have been so excited to talk to you about, specifically because of the fact that it is something that can be recognized on a global scale, not to say that all of the other countless achievements that you have, I mean, you're so humble you probably wouldn't acknowledge that even if I lauded you with all the compliments, but something on a national, global scale that people could recognize is a project that you finished called Queenie Pie with Jeff Helmer. And, in addition to all the performing and recording credits that you have that are incredibly, they exceed musicians' wildest dreams, I have to imagine that this project was equally as stressful as it was gratifying because of the large shoes to fill of Duke Ellington. For those of us who don't know what Queenie Pie is, could you fill us in?
Yes, Queenie Pie is what Duke Ellington referred to as his folk opera that he worked on really for decades of his life off and on. He wrote the story, he writes songs, and he sort of changed them in and out. It was kind of a morphing sort of a story that he worked on, and his sort of dying wish that he expressed to the woman who had been his partner for many years, his name is Betty McGettigan, was to see that folk opera come to realization. And so she kind of made that her business. And a few entities had sort of taken a stab at it. Actually, it was the Butler Opera Center over at UT, put together through the generosity of Ernest and Sarah Butler, that acquired Queenie Pie with the idea that it would be a joint UT opera, UT music, and also Houston Tillotson University for singers and dancers and costumes and things, and that was the idea. And so UT acquired this, what was thought to be the score that had been done by somebody, and it turned out that the only thing that was there were the lead sheets that Duke Ellington had written. So it was just the song forms, the words, the melody line, chord changes. No part of it that's what we think of as Duke Ellington, the sound of the big band. None of that existed other than maybe in Ellington's mind. So Jeff and I divided it up and studied a lot of Ellington, and for certain things we could adapt, and we put that together. You talked about there being pressure. I mean, there was nobody there to, we wanted it, if the pressure was from ourselves, we wanted it to be as good as possible.
Sure.
And so it was a very gratifying 8-night run over at the McCullough Theater on the UT campus. Again, a kind of combined cast of UT music students with the UT Jazz Orchestra being the on-stage backing band, and singers, dancers, costumes, other sort of directors from Houston Tillotson, and then a couple of guest stars in the lead roles, which I think feeds back into a subject you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I jump onto that and kind of this beautiful, rich history of that collaboration you've had, what was it like start to finish? What was the timeline there? How long were you and Jeff working on this?
Well, it was sort of, we kind of had it kind of over a Christmas break was kind of like when we saw what was there, we saw the lead sheets, we decided how to kind of split the labor between us, who would take which songs. And then it seems like it was kind of that spring that the rehearsals started. So we didn't have a lot of turnaround time. Yeah.
And that record that is out on the gloriously benefiting musicians platform that we now know as Spotify. It's just amazing for jazz musicians, especially. Yeah, you can quit your day job. That is considered the definitive recording, is it not?
Well, it was. Certainly, Betty McGettigan thought it was because she had seen some other, I won't name their names and cities, but some rather illustrious opera companies that had supposedly taken it on and nothing had really happened. So she was thrilled and she felt like that was the definitive. Finally, here it is. This start to finish, it was Duke's music, and it was presented in the spirit of Ellington's orchestra rather than just being maybe just a trio faking some lead sheets. And, it was given its due. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Well, and the person who was in that lead role, obviously, of Queenie Pie was Carmen Bradford. Again, can we have a hand for Carmen Bradford? I'm sure she's listening to this stream. Who was one of the last, if not the last, vocalist to perform with Basie. And so to have somebody who had direct experience with Basie and then also to be performing in the lead role of this, completion of a Duke Ellington. I mean, those are the two big Titan names. We have the Basie ending and the Ellington ending that are just stock endings for jazz musicians. So, anyways, having Carmen and bringing her back in, was that your idea, or was it just a happy circumstance?
Well, when we were thinking about who would do the lead role, I mean, Jeff and I immediately both thought of Carmen. She's just so perfect for it. And so I can't remember if she was living in L.A. at that time or where she currently lives outside of Atlanta, but it was just, we didn't even have to discuss it. It was like, who would be the lead role? Okay, Carmen. And then the only question was maybe who would do the male role. So anyway, but yeah, she was fantastic. And it's a bunch of great songs. And, it was just a beautiful production.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Carmen, I mean, going back just a little bit in the history of how you guys met and you were performing together, was Minor Miracle the group that you first collaborated on, or was it just one of them?
Minor Miracle already existed with another wonderful Austin singer who ended up singing with Leonard Cohen and people named Julie Christensen. She was the original vocalist. Yeah, a lot of you know Julie. And singer Andy Murphy, who's also a fine recording engineer, was a singer. And at one point, I was introduced to Carmen through some studio work by Andy. And then the size of the group was pared down for, of course, the economic realities. And Carmen was singing, so I had the benefit of all those gigs working with Carmen, and she was inspiring every single time. And then, one night, she opened, sang in front of the Count Basie Orchestra, and Carmen is already sort of born royalty in jazz. Both her parents are very acclaimed jazz musicians, and so she wasn't a total stranger to those people. Those people knew about her, and Carmen's big break ended up being the last night of that version of Minor Miracle, even though that wasn't the band. So we kind of moved on, but I've worked with Carmen over the years in a number of different projects, writing arrangements for her, playing with her live performances, did this CD with her, features her straight through, and continues to this day to be a dear friend and somebody I try to collaborate every opportunity. But she's right there in the middle of really all the greatest jazz musicians. She worked for years with Butch Miles is out there. She worked with Butch for years, and so anyway, Carmen's one of a kind.
Fantastic. And that album, which is called Invisible Designs, as well as Flying Blind, which you have heard several compositions, including Half Past Sunday this evening, and then also a third record, which it's something Dreams.
Caffeine Dreams.
Caffeine Dreams. You've got the caffeine, I've got the bourbon, so I need your assistance. But those are all, for those of you who are here in the audience, those are available for purchase over at the makeshift bar that we have over here. And for those those of you who are tuning into the live stream and would like to grab a copy, you can go over to something that Michael Mordecai has been the father of, Fable Records, which is a record label that has featured so many prominent jazz musicians here in the Austin scene over the past 5 decades? Yeah, who's counting? Not me. Not me. Which I believe that website URL is fablerecords.biz, and it features so many amazing things, including another thing we'll talk about in just a little bit, Star-Crossed, which featured John's first ability to have a compositional platform back in '75. But for now, I want to hear some more of this band.
Okay, we've got. Can we do a couple tunes here, or what's our time frame?
Let's see. We got 52, so let's do one more.
Okay, let's do that one that I misintroduced before. Let's do "Flying Blind" right now. Okay.
Perfect. And again, "Flying Blind" is the title track of the CD that is available for sale. It's nothing if not a good plug. We got to make sure to get these guys as much as we can with all these recorded works, because guess what? When you support recorded works and you buy the CDs and they don't sit in the closet for 3 decades, that helps them make more. So support albums. Here's "Flying Blind." Safe. Did someone say one more song, guys? It's like just hold out for one more song. You're batting like a 400. You know, like it's going to be just one more song. Amazing. Well, John, man, one of the other things that we briefly mentioned in the last little segment before that last tune was that Fable Records has been, you know, kind of a formidable force in terms of, you know, highlighting a lot of the most prolific and established Austin jazz musicians over the past, again, 5 decades. But again, who's counting? You know, and I wanted to ask you about, I understand that Starcrossed, that 75 LP was your first compositional kind of foray of like very established.
Yeah, that's right. And Michael Mordecai, who's the head of Fable Records, and was, you know, we collaborated really in the group Starcrossed. And it happens to be that a member of the group Starcrossed, our piano player David Deaton, and our longtime sound man Rusty Buckner are both here in attendance right here in this very room. Thank you guys for showing up.
We did not plan that. We did not plan that at all. Fantastic. And I also read that that 75 LP from Starcrossed was featured on BBC Radio, was stolen and sampled by a Detroit-based rapper.
What an honor to have your music stolen by a... That's what I live for.
Right. And then was reissued in both Japan and the UK as recently as 2016.
That's right.
Wow.
There were some good tracks on there.
Yeah. Did you have any idea, Starcrossed or otherwise, of the lasting impact that record label and that record itself would have?
Well, of course not. That was our first time around the block, and you never would expect that or never even want to think about that. You're always just trying to do the best thing you can in the moment. But a great thing about, well, those days in Austin, that was the heyday of Armadillo World Headquarters, which was at the corner of Barton Springs Road and South First, somewhere around there. And it was a fantastic venue, not only for all the greatest up-and-coming rock and roll acts, you know, people like, on his way up, just making a name for himself, Bruce Springsteen would be there, you know, people like that. But that was like the place. But because of Hank Ulrich, who was one of the owners anyway, and a great jazz fan, he would bring in wonderful jazz acts just for his own entertainment, really. Not that they were big ticket sellers. And the great thing about the Armadillo was, no matter who the big act was, an Austin band would be the opening act, an appropriate Austin act. So of all the kinds of Austin music there was that great stage opportunity in front of your heroes to be the opening act. That was, you know, we were so lucky. We knew we were lucky then. You know, we were all in our 20s, and we never took that for granted. We knew that was a special opportunity, and I can't think of anything quite like that ever coming around again. That was some very special times.
Sure, yeah. Well, and another thing too, I mean, obviously, you know, we can talk about Starcrossed, but we can also talk about the band that is here today, and I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to know what was, and I'm going to steal an SAT or GRE word from Colin Shook that he said the other day that I really enjoyed, was what was the impetus or the motivation for creating John Mills Times 10?
Well, it was a combination of elements. I mean, I've been writing a lot of music, period. I had specifically a late, great Bob Meyer, a wonderful musician we played with, who was a fantastic trumpet player, fantastic saxophone player, fantastic piano player, fantastic arranger, composer, and he started a production company of kind of published big band charts, but he was specializing not just in full big band, but in a 10-piece band size. He was building a catalog. He had all kinds of stuff himself, but he invited some local writers, me included, to be in on that. So some of the very first things I wrote for a 10-piece band were for his publishing, Concept Music publishing company. And that was some of the starting material. I had been, you know, and then just through Michael Mordecai in an opening, once a month opening at the Elephant Room, I just decided to just jump in and convert a lot of music I'd written for different groups over the years. School, like University of Texas Jazz Orchestra, or a group like the Creative Opportunity Orchestra, Tina Marsh's CO2. I took music from a lot of different sources, and then I wrote music just specifically for Times 10, and I just did it for 10 pieces, and it was practically just from one month to the next. We had one rehearsal, and we didn't play a single song all the way through. You know, we would play just the kind of the melody part and find the tempo, go, okay, that's it, next one. And that's as much as we knew going into our first gig. And everything since then has just sort of been built on people's instincts and, you know, adding new material and stuff. But we jumped in before we were ready, which is a good thing, because, you know, or else it would never happen.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, the flexibility of the group to do that is certainly evidenced by the fact that last night was the first time that John Mills Times 10 has been back together in 15 months, and the band sounds like this.
Yeah,
Crazy.
you know, great players, and I can't express enough to you gentlemen, just the idea these guys keep coming back for more punishment. That's very encouraging.
Well, just asking now, you know, we talked the other day when we were filming this little promo for what was happening now, and you had said that you had been writing every single day of the pandemic, and I'm curious if you feel naturally drawn after all this time writing for Times 10. Obviously, you write for so many different things, but if you feel that now there's a certain sentiment where you think more in terms of Times 10, or is it really just a toss-up every time you sit down?
I do it a lot of times. I mean, I write for other directions as well. I mean, most of the music that you hear all came from one 5-minute span or 10-minute span at the piano, where that's the music. And then there's the work of sort of finalizing the arrangement and orchestrating it for all these players and laying it on paper. But the initial idea is something I do every day. And usually where I start with is, okay, we're at the Elephant Room, and some people are, you know, coming down the stairs. What do I want them to hear? What kind of groove is that? What kind of mood might that be? And that's usually where I start and just sort of improvise from there.
Amazing. Well, you know, we are nearing the end of the evening where we have about time for just a couple quick closing statements and then one more tune from the band. One thing that I want to make sure is just to acknowledge some people who have really made this thing happen. I won't mention Tito's again, although, you know, I really want them to know, you know, that I have a soft spot for them right in my heart. But a special acknowledgement to a few people as we embark upon this kind of second season of Off the Bandstand. I've kind of told some people that have been here in the scene, but a big announcement is that every episode of Off the Bandstand now, instead of being taking place over Zoom in my apartment, will now be taking place here, courtesy of Colin Shook in Monk's Jazz Club.
Oh, right.
And we'll be doing a hybrid of different episodes where it's just, you know, the three of us here in the room, or might have some studio audiences. A couple of those things are being worked out right now, so we will have those announcements for you very soon. Another thing is that one of the things I hear about all the time is about how much of a bop to use another one of those words, a bop the opening title sequence of Off the Bandstand is, and that would certainly not be possible without the wisdom and the creativity of what James Souter might refer to as a very talented boy, a composer, arranger, pianist, Thomas Wanglinski, who just graduated from the University of Texas. Graduated from the... and studied under a lot of these folks here, and is now at the University of Miami at Frost School of Music. And another thing to announce is that, we haven't said this publicly before, but John put today in his Facebook post that John Mills Times 10 was going to be the largest group that has been in this room. And I just thought, well, that just cannot do. I got to try to, you know, one up in my infinite wisdom of being 25 years old, one up John Mills. So on Tuesday, July 27th, we are going to be mounting a brand new big band, which is going to feature the arrangements and compositions of Thomas Wanglinski, myself, David Mescatique, who is also in the house with us here tonight, Stephen Feifke, Rich DeRosa, and a handful of other arrangers, Mike Sailors, with an all-star big band, 17 pieces. pieces. It's going to be the Christian Wiggs Big Band, melding together original tunes, standards, and contemporary tunes reformatted in the in the jazz big band idiom. So we are very excited to announce that. Keep an eye out for the tickets. We'll be announcing that very soon. And then last, I just, one more thing is that this logo, which I am obsessed with, was created by a guy who I went to high school with. We were in marching band together. He played euphonium, I played trumpet, and we have reconnected over the years. His name is Steven Swirsky. He now works for, let me make sure I got this right, Powerhouse Animation, who is responsible for the anime show Castlevania on Netflix, if you are familiar with Castlevania. So the new Off the Bandstand logo is courtesy of Steven Swirsky. I'm so incredibly happy. I feel like a kid in a candy store every time I get to collaborate with people like John, Steven, Thomas, Colin, everybody in this room. It is just, I'm filled with gratitude, and I could not be, if I talk any more about it, I'm going to get emotional, so I'm going to move on. And then the last thing is that, the man who has made the magic happen this past years through these immersive live stream concerts, working hours where he sleeps up here and he gets 2 hours of sleep and he puts on these amazing 8-camera productions for the past year, keeping the glue of the Austin scene together. Please put your hands together for Colin Shook. He looked at me whenever I brought in these chairs yesterday and we started getting the setup and positioning the tables, and he's like, "Are we about to have like a late night talk show here in Monks?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's gonna be sick. It's gonna be amazing." So again, the last thing, the way we end every single episode of Off the Bandstand, and it's so fun, there is really, truly run the gamut, is that we all have gigs from hell where things go up the wall and we just cannot believe what is happening before our eyes. John Mills, after 50 years of Austin and elsewhere, can you recall a time that was a gig from hell?
Well, there was a recent one where I was hired to play Barry sax on an outdoor gig in San Antonio. It was kind of winter, so it was a chilly evening, and as luck had it, I had just put my Barry sax in the shop, so I didn't have access to it. But by a stroke of luck, I had just bought a backup Barry that I tried it out and it sounded really good in the room, and I thought, hey, I've got this horn. This is the perfect, I'm prepared. So I showed up for the gig with my trusty or not trusty new Barry, and it just the usual, meeting and greeting with fellow members of the band, and it was about 60 seconds before downbeat, and I played a note on my baritone sax, and I was like a quarter tone flat. I mean, just where you couldn't possibly play a right note. There's just no fixing it. So I pushed the mouthpiece in further and tried, still horribly flat. Pushed it in a little further, still wasn't going to work. It was about 15 seconds till downbeat. I pushed it one last push, and the neck just snapped off. The neck didn't come out, it snapped off the metal, just broke right inside the tube. And the late, great Morgan King was right next to me, and he just kind of gave me a deadpan look like, I wonder what's going to happen now. This should be interesting. So I had a slot like about a dime's thickness where I could place, there was nothing to fit the thing in, but I could kind of place my neck on the Barry, and wow, I could play some notes. I was functional. And okay, so far I just sort of, just keep it balanced there, and I could kind of play, I could play my parts. But as soon as I got offered a solo, the first, I thought, okay, I could take a solo on, A Train or whatever it was. And I played about, and then just the motion of my head, because you can't control it. When you get emotionally attached when you play a solo, you can't be still. And I was left holding a saxophone with the neck and the mouthpiece sticking out, you know, is just, and I know Michael Mordecai and maybe Eric, I don't know who was there, but leading the laughing section when that happened. I mean, it was hilarious. Sometimes those things are so miserable, it's like, man, it's gonna be a long time before this is funny. It was funny then, right, as it happened. And so over the course of the night, I could keep it together playing my parts, but then the other guys would egg it on for me to try another solo because they wanted to see that happen again, you know. And I always felt like, okay, well, I can do this, you know. I know what the problem is, so I'll just keep very still and just play. It doesn't have to be a great solo, just a reasonable solo, and I'd get about 4 beats into it, and it would happen again, and you know. I never totally wised up. I probably tried it about 4 times that evening. I never got any further than 2 seconds. It was like the guy trying to ride the bucking bronco and doesn't even last, you know, 0.2 seconds. It was a total failure every time. So that was a long night.
Absolutely incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, John Mills.
All right.
Again, we do have right up top, for those of you here in the audience tonight who would love to tip the band, and for those of you who are watching at home, there is a Venmo and a PayPal right above my head, and then also the link to my website, christianwiggs.com, where you can keep up with every episode of Off the Bandstand going forward, and the catalog of 49 beforehand. So anyways, let's go ahead with the last tune. John, what do you have for us?
We're going to do Used to Be Blue. If we get to the solos, let's have Jake take the first one and Russ take the second one. Used to Be Blue, okay? Yeah, you want to see that, huh? Are we ready?
John Mills times 10. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up. Give it up for John Mills and times 10. Colin Shook, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great night. Please drive safe and check out the future episodes of Off the Bandstand featuring episode 51, Andre Hayward, soon to come. Good night.